if I may just interrupt for a moment, you realize there's a little bit of a problem in getting people to talk critically about the Church of Scientology, because quite frankly, they're scared.
Oh, no.
Well,
In my last video, I discussed the infamous religious group Scientology. Created in the 1950s by sci-fi writer L. Ron Hubbard, Scientology has grown today to have millions of members, according to the church at least. This religion that promises spiritual enlightenment has been a thing of controversy for about as long as it's existed. They've been accused of exploiting their members for monetary gain, harassment, and all different types of abuse. Today, we're going to be talking about one of the darker aspects of Scientology, its prison camp called The Hole, which Scientology denies the existence of to this day. The Hole is the unofficial nickname of a facility operated by the Church of Scientology on Gold Base located in the San Jacinto Mountains of California. The facility consists of a set of double-wide trailers conjoined together, which used to serve the purpose of being offices for the church's international management team. Gold Base was initially acquired by Scientology in 1978 under an alias to keep it a secret. It was staffed by CO.AG members. The CO.AGs are Scientology's inner circle of most dedicated members, only consisting of around 6,000 people. The CO.AGs are held to a code of ethics they must adhere to. Violation of this code was one of the many grounds for being sent to the hole for months or even years at a time. Violations included performing poor work, showing any doubt or hostility toward the church, or literally anything that angered the leader of Scientology, David Miscavige. It isn't difficult for one to find themselves in the hole. Life in this facility was not pleasant. Up to 100 people at a time would be cramped up in the double-wide trailers, leaving hardly any space to move around. People would sleep in sleeping bags on the floor, desktops, and in cubicles. The only time they were ever allowed to leave was to attend church events or shower. They were only given 15-minute time periods to eat, and the food they were given consisted of leftovers and slop. To add to the already horrible living conditions, the building was infested with ants, and there were times when the electricity wouldn't work, which caused the indoor temperature to reach over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Leaving wasn't an option. Most of these people had been brainwashed into thinking they truly deserved this, and even those who did try to escape were rarely ever successful. The perimeter was heavily guarded, and a bladed fence surrounded the entire facility. Those who tried to escape were caught by CO.AG pursuit teams and subjected to further punishment. We're only getting started with the conditions these people had to endure and still endure. They were forced to participate in group confessions, in which they had to confess negative thoughts toward David Miscavige and Scientology. As an ex-Scientology executive stated, it was like Lord of the Flies in there. Prisoners would try to force each other to confess to ludicrous things by screaming at each other and resorting to violence. Some of the more specific punishments they endured involved being forced to crawl around a conference table for long periods of time, being kicked from behind if they stopped. Others had to sit under an air vent with the AC blasting while cold water was repeatedly poured over their head for over an hour. Although the church denies these things ever happening, there are some pretty horrific punishment practices they do admit to. These include a modified version of overboarding that David Miscavige reintroduced in 2000. At night, members would be brought out to the base's pool or muddy lake and forced to either jump or be pushed into the water in freezing cold conditions while David Miscavige watched. Additionally, the group of CO.AGs were brought into one of these offices and forced to play a twisted version of musical chairs. The rules were the same as usual, except they were told that whoever couldn't find a chair would be sent away from Scientology and their families. The game quickly became violent as people pushed each other into the walls and snatched chairs away from people in their desperate attempts to stay in the game. At the end of this sadistic game, they were all told they were still allowed to stay in Scientology.
One time Mr. Miscavige ordered his communicator to break my finger if I didn't answer his question.
In 2012, Debbie Cook, ex-Scientology executive who spent 7 weeks in the hole, testified in a court case against Scientology about the atrocities of the hole.
There were ants. The place was infested by ants, so ants would crawl on you. And there was a 2-week period during that time when all the electricity had been shut off as ordered by Mr. Miscavige. And this was, of course, in summer in the desert, and so the temperature in there was about 106.
She was one of the first to speak out against what was happening, which eventually prompted others who escaped the hole to talk about what went on in there. Later on, another ex-Scientology executive, Mike Rinder, who spent nearly 2 years in the hole, talked about his experience there.
None of the people that were in the hole had just walked out of, a job at the Village Voice. They're all people who had years and years and years of indoctrination into this is how things are, and this is what's right, and this is what's acceptable, and this is what you tolerate, and here's what you put up with.
Another former executive, Mark Rathbun, only spent 4 days in the hole in 2004 before deciding to escape after seeing his friend, Tom DeVocht, being beaten by Dave Miscavige. One night, while the prisoners were told to jog to a building 400 yards away and back, he hid in a bush until everyone was gone, retrieved his motorcycle, and hid by the gates until they opened to let a car in. He used this opportunity to bounce. His friend, Tom DeVocht, escaped a year later by somehow managing to climb over the fence and walk 6 miles to a bordering city. All this talk led to investigation into Scientology by the police and then the FBI. The police had no luck doing anything because of legal difficulties, as well as Scientology members flat out refusing to speak to the police. Once the FBI got involved, however, they were able to use aerial surveillance to see that there were executives being escorted by guards to and from the hole. Not long after this, there was a court ruling which stated that Scientology's activities were protected under the First Amendment's freedom of religion, which caused the FBI's investigation to come to a halt. Although Scientology denies the existence of the hole, I have no doubt that it does exist. All the testimonies from the escapees, although anecdotal, can't be ignored. Plus, the FBI's brief surveillance confirms something is definitely up. It's unsettling to know that there are still people being subjected to these conditions, but there's not much that any of us can really do, except spread awareness of what's going on. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the flip side.